Do you desire to be led of God? Do you desire for Him to guide your steps and your movement, to tell you whether to go right or to go left, to stop or to go forward? Do you desire for Him to order every single one of your steps? If you do, then you and I have a lot in common, because I really, really desire that as well. And so today I want to share 5 steps on how to be led by God. Hey there, my name is Joyce Omondi Waihiga. Welcome to another episode of CITAM Church Online. So, in looking at how to be led by God, I think one of the stories that we can reflect on is found in 1 Chronicles chapter 14. And it's about David going up against the Philistines, King David going up against the Philistines. The first way to be led of God is to seek God. Verse 8 says, "When the Philistines heard that David had been anointed king over all Israel, they went up in full force to search for him. But David heard about it and went out to meet them. Now the Philistines had come and raided the valley of Rephaim. So David inquired of God, 'Shall I go and attack the Philistines? Will you deliver them into my hands?' The Lord answered him, 'Go, I will deliver them into your hands.'" And so as David sought God and looked to Him for guidance, he was blessed. God honored David's dependence on Him and gave him the promise of victory. And as I'm sure you know, the promises of God are yes and amen. It's not like the promises of man, where we can say one thing and do another. God values us depending on Him, and when we seek Him, He promises that He will be found. The second way on how to be led by God is to seek God again, especially after winning. Verse 13 says, "Once more the Philistines raided the valley. So David inquired of God again." Now, after the first victory over the Philistines, David was actually wise enough to wait on the Lord before the second battle. Now, it's easy for many of us, if we were in the same shoes, to say, "Oh, you know what, I've been here before, done that. In fact, I even won this thing already. Like, I know how it's done. This is gonna be easy, like no stress." But the truth is, I think that's the point at which we can really get in trouble, because it means that we become self-sufficient and rely on our own strength rather than on God. And so one of the secrets to David's success was that he always triumphed when he sought God and obeyed God. God expects us to come back to Him every single time. Just because we've won 5 times before, He expects us to come back to Him on time number 6 and on time number 7, time number 8. He requires us to be dependent on Him, whether we fought 1 battle or 5,000 battles. The third step on how we can be led by God is to take note of His instructions. It's interesting that the first time round of the battle, God just said to David, "Go, I will deliver them into your hand." But this second time around, God directed David differently. In fact, He gave him very specific instructions on how to defeat the Philistines. Verse 14 says, "And God answered him, 'Do not go directly after them, but circle around them and attack them in front of the poplar trees.'" Now, what does this tell us? It means that we still have to engage in battle. Even though He had defeated them before, and even though God could have literally just struck them down by the stroke of His hand, David still had to go into battle. And to me, that tells me that we can face the same enemy, but not every battle is the same. tactics need to change. And if you're going to just be reliant on yourself, you're going to lose. God needs to give you that wisdom. God needs to give you that understanding so that you're not overtaken or overcome by what you think is familiar just because you faced it before, but maybe they've whipped out some other weapons in their arsenal. The fourth way or the fourth step, I think, to how we can be led by God is to wait and listen for his signal. Verse 15 says, "As soon as you hear the sound of marching in the tops of the poplar trees, move out to battle, because that will mean God has gone out in front of you to strike the Philistine army." Now, this really amazes me. Can you imagine that sound of the trees rustling and the footsteps of the Lord's army going before David? I mean, it's so imaginative to me and it really fascinates me. If David was not keenly waiting on God, he would have missed it. He would have missed the sound. He wouldn't have heard it. If he wasn't listening for that rustle and paying attention to God's signal, who knows what could have happened next? And so to be led by God, we must wait. We must listen out for him. We must look out for him and for his signal. And finally, the fifth step to being led by God is to act on his command. Verse 16 says, "So David did as God commanded him, and they struck down the Philistine army all the way from Gibeon to Gezer. And so David's fame spread throughout every land, and the Lord made all the nations fear him." To be led of God means to follow him when he says it's time. If he gives you an instruction, act on it. Follow his command, obey his directive. I really pray that these steps encourage you today. If you've been in a place where you're really seeking God to guide you and you've not been sure of what your part is. 1, seek God. 2, seek God again, especially after you've won the first time or a previous time. Even if you've won 5,000 times, seek God again and again. 3, take note of his instructions. 4, wait and listen for his signal. And 5, act on his command. I'd love to know what you think about this. Do you agree? Maybe you have some additional thoughts. I'd love to hear them. Reach out to me on social media on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Joyce Omondi. And we'd also love to catch up with you on at CITAM ChurchOnline on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter as well. Thank you so much for watching. God bless you. Have a wonderful week. We'll see you next time. Ciao.